In the last two videos, you handled events by referencing the event directly in the component's MXML tag. In this video, you will learn how to handle the events by creating event listeners in ActionScript. This is the code that creates the event handler in the company vehicle request form that I've been demonstrating in the last two videos. I am removing the change event from both date chooser instances so that I can replace them in ActionScript. There are several important reasons why you would create event listeners in ActionScript. Some ActionScript classes do not have an MXML equivalent. That means that the MXML syntax for creating the event listener does not exist, so you must use ActionScript to register the event listener. Advanced event handling, which requires adding and removing event listeners, can only be implemented in ActionScript. Lastly, some developers just prefer the ActionScript syntax over MXML. When I added a change event to the dateChooser MXML tag for this example, the event was registered with the component when the dateChooser instances were created in the application. With ActionScript, I can determine the conditions for when I register the event with the component instance. However, listeners are often added based on some system event, like when the component or the application starts up. You will learn more about system events in later videos, but I would like to discuss two of them now that are dispatched when the component starts up. Of the two system events in this discussion, the initialize event fires first, even before the component determines its visual appearance. Because it fires before the component display is finalized, it is the better choice when your event handler code affects the component's layout or look and feel. The creation complete event fires after a component has been measured, laid out, and is visible. Because it fires after a component display is finalized, it is the better choice when your event handler code relies on the component's size, position, or appearance. In my example, I want to register the click event when the dateChooser instances are created and ready for use, so I will add the event listener on the creation complete event. I am scrolling up to the top of the main application file to locate the application container. In an earlier exercise, you used the creation complete event to request the data for the application drop-down list control. I am adding a second method call to the creation complete event by typing a semicolon and the custom function named init app, which I will create later. Remember that in my example, the event object is data typed to the calendar layout change event class. Also note that the type property of the event object is change. This code shows the syntax for adding event listeners to an object. The first step is to reference the instance name of the object to which the event listener is being added. You will use the add event listener method of the event dispatcher class to register an event handler for an object. The event type string references both user and system events. In my example, I am detecting when the user changes the selected date, so the event type is change. The second required attribute of the add event listener method is the name of the function that should execute when the event is fired. The event object is created, and the add event listener method implicitly passes the event object to the event listener function. Within the script block above the date change handler function, I am creating a private function named init app that takes no parameters and returns a void return type. Inside the function, I am referencing the pickup date instance and using the add event listener method to define the handler for the change event. For the second argument, I am referencing the date change handler function. Note that I am not adding parentheses to the date change handler reference. This code does not invoke the function, but rather just references it. I am copying and pasting this line of code one more time, and then I'm changing the second line to reference the return date instance and saving the file. When I run the application and click on a date in both date chooser instances, the application works as before. The date change handler function is being called each and every time the user changes a selected date. However, using the change event type string is not considered a good practice because the compiler will not catch any misspellings in the string, which may lead to unexpected behavior that could be difficult to debug. The better practice is to use the constant name. If you misspell a constant name in your code, the compiler will catch the mistake immediately. You can easily find information about the constants available in your event by searching for the event in the language reference. I have located the calendar layout change event documentation and am scrolling down to find the public constants section. You can see that the calendar layout change event change constant is the constant value that you should use for the event type. Back in Flash Builder, I am updating the add event listener to use the change public constant. I am deleting the change string and pressing the Control space keys to force code hinting to appear. When I start typing calendar layout change event, the public constant appears for me to select. I'm also updating the event type in the second add event listener method. When I save the file and run the application, you can see that the event handlers function normally. For your next step, work through the exercise titled Using the Add Event Listener method.